Welcome back, everybody, to WTF is on my mind. There's a lot on my mind today. But first, for those of you that live under a rock, there is a new podcast out starring Allison Mack from CBC. And I have been doing a Patreon-only response. I started with the first episode. I'll probably do one per week at least about my thoughts about the podcast and what Allison's saying. I lived with Allison for many years. I've known her for a long time. I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm going to go one by one. So if you want to listen to what I have to say, it is at patreon.com/Mark Vicente. Go check it out. It is somewhat unfiltered. I have to be careful for legal reasons, but it's pretty unfiltered. And if I'm filtering, I'm sometimes inferring, and, because there's lawyers listening and watching and taking notes, as always. But today, I am honored to welcome Jared Mello, better known as the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. Jared has walked through addiction, mental health collapse, codependency, and repeated entanglements with high-control relational dynamics, and he's emerged with a laser-sharp focus on one core idea, maybe more than one. Self-respect so radical that you'll never be a repeat victim. We will dig into what that means, how it works, why it matters, especially for folks recovering from narcissistic abuse, coercive control, and identity head effery. That is my intro for you, sir.
I love it.
I want to start at the beginning. I really am curious, what happened that you arrived here to talk about these things? I mean, shit had to have happened.
Oh my Lord. That's a lot to answer right there, because it started in the family, a lot of narcissistic people in the family, but I did not know that at the time. I just thought, this is my normal. And of course, everything is my fault. Of course, your parents are going to be really difficult on you, hard on you, super critical, belittling, and all those kinds of things. That's where it began. I just didn't know that was the beginning. I didn't get woken up until I was in a relationship with a covert narcissistic woman. That gave me my sixth sense moment. But between then and to that time, there was a lot in between, because there was addiction struggles, mental health struggles, and that was a big thing right there, right? That was out of control, just the addiction and mental health stuff as well.
Did that come from the stuff you went through?
I think some of it was innate. I think I was undiagnosed on the spectrum, and I had all this anxiety growing up. It came out as social anxiety, but I just didn't know what it was. And so then in my high school years, I started self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. And at the time, I thought that was the best thing ever, because all that anxiety that I would normally feel melted away. And then I would feel confident, and I was like, oh, why wouldn't I want to feel like this all the time? My normal baseline wasn't good. And this is where I think I need to make a distinction too. There is a difference between innate issues. So maybe if someone's on the spectrum, that is different than trauma. And that's one of the things I was tripped up on for a long time. I was like, oh, if I can just heal this trauma from the CPTSD that I had growing up and then the bullying I experienced, I would be okay. But I didn't realize that, no, the autism is a separate issue than the trauma. They go hand in hand sometimes, right? If you are undiagnosed on the spectrum, you don't know. You don't know that's what's going on. And then you're more likely a lot of times to be picked on. And I just wasn't able to defend myself back then. But it's one of the reasons that radical self-respect is so important to me now, because if I can go back and talk to that version of me in high school that was getting bullied and picked on, I would have told him, hey, just shut the F up, and stood up for myself. That would have stopped a lot of it, unfortunately. But since I didn't do that, it encouraged more.
Amen, brother. If we could just go back in time, right? So with autism, so what is that like for you? I'm just curious. I don't know what it's like. I'm just curious. What's it like for you?
Well, for me, it came out as severe anxiety, being hyper-focused on certain things, not being able to shift between one activity to another. But that anxiety and awkwardness, to me, that was the worst part of it. I think everyone's autism will come out a little bit differently, but that's how it was for me. And that's part of the reason I wound up on drugs like heroin, methadone. Like I went all the way, and I'm lucky to be even
Wow.
alive. But
Wow, that's hardcore.
oh, for sure. I mean, I joke about it now. That's kind of one of the ways I deal with it. And I make jokes like, have you even lived if you haven't disappointed your entire family by the time you're 19 and at rehab with a group full of strangers from 20 to 70 years old?
Wow. God, what a journey, man. So I just want to, before going to radical self-respect, which I love that term, just to go back to what you said was your sixth sense moment. Can you describe, like, in more detail what that was?
So when I was dating this woman, I thought she was everything that I had always wanted. She was a beautiful Brazilian woman that instantly started love bombing me, telling me how amazing she thought I was, how attractive she thought I was. And she started taking pictures of me for my podcast cover art at the time. And I just fell head over heels for her. I didn't realize that it wasn't really mutual. I didn't realize the love bombing dynamic, right? So what eventually happened is it went from a devalue to discard pretty quickly. And I was left like, what the hell is this? Like she was telling me how amazing I am, that she really cared about me, loved me. And now all of a sudden she's gone. And I was like, what the hell just happened? I got the rug pulled out from underneath me. It always reminds me of that Louis Capaldi song. Somebody pulled the rug. Like that's how it felt, right? I was like, what the hell is going on here? And then I started looking online to try to find answers. I think that's how a lot of us find this stuff. We look for the answers out there. And then I stumbled across narcissism content. One of the first people I stumbled across was Meredith Miller about 6-7 years ago. And I think she's amazing. And her,
Yep.
Dr. Grande, a couple others, even Sam Vaknin, like I was able to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And they said, oh, if you're with a narcissistic romantic partner, you're actually pretty likely to have had a narcissistic parent. And I was like, what? Like, really? And so I looked into it and I was like, oh, you know what? That's exactly what it seems like. And in my experience, it's still difficult for me to tell. It's like, was my parent autistic with narcissistic traits? Or I don't know what it was, but the behaviors looked exactly the same. We'll put it like that. Like the belittling, criticizing. It can be difficult to tell sometimes.
You know, I want to just take a quick detour because I've had people say to me, well, you know, autism can present as though the person has no empathy, has no feelings, can present as though they're psychopathic, and it's not psychopathy. And that kind of took me back, and I was like, well, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a good question because I think, one, narcissism can be comorbid with autism. So that makes it more tricky too. And I think in my parents' example, it's probably what it was, more of a comorbid thing. But I think they come off as extremely socially uncalibrated. If someone's truly autistic, they just don't understand. They don't understand social dynamics. So it's hard for them to have empathy for what they don't understand. And that's different, though, than, say, the lack of empathy in a psychopath or narcissistic person. Like those people, they don't feel it, and they don't even care to try to understand to feel it. They just want what they want. Like they want power, control. They want to manage their image, get narcissistic supply, and avoid accountability.
Right. And also I've noticed, I have somebody in my family on the spectrum. I've noticed that when it's brought to their attention that they've done something that maybe isn't cool, they genuinely feel like, oh, that's not good. And I don't want to do that again. Right?
Exactly. I think their ability to take accountability, their ability to admit when they're wrong, and then try to work on changing behavior, that to me is what separates it. Like someone with autism, they should be able to do those things, right? They might feel a little unpleasant at first, but ultimately they should be able to say, okay, I messed up here. I'm going to try to do better. But if you see somebody that just refuses and then plants their foot on the ground and says, no, it was you that are the problem. Like to me, that's the issue. Now, if you talk to some people, they will say it's just intent that's the issue because they can look so similar. So they'll say people with ADHD or autism have pathological demand avoidance or rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And I kind of think some of that it's a thing, but I also think it gets used. And I think a lot of narcissistic people use it to kind of cover themselves.
Yeah. Also, though, and I don't know if you agree with this, I've never met a person on the autism spectrum who's predatory, ever.
I would agree with that. I think it would have to be someone that is also comorbid with something else generally. Now, granted, any kind of human can be an asshole too. Like that's also a different thing, but that's not pathological per se. I think the predators, that's where you're going in the cluster B category there.
Yeah. Just before we get to the self-respect, so I did a podcast episode with Richard Grannon, and I was reading on your website that you have dealt with partners who are narcissistic, partners who are borderline. And I'm just wondering from your perspective, like what's the difference between those two types or archetypes for you?
That's a great question. Because, I mean, there was a time when I thought I might have been borderline because it was the undiagnosed autism that made me think that. But in reality, it was really just undiagnosed autism. But the big difference is the borderlines have the fear of abandonment, right? And their issues are more clear to see at first. That's one of the big differences I see. A lot of borderline people, they'll admit they have a problem. They'll admit, and you'll often see substance abuse or alcohol issues or other mood disorder issues, and they're there on the surface. Like you can see it. So they don't present as put together as a narcissistic person would a lot of times. The narcissistic person, they present well, but it's not until you see under the mask, for lack of a better word, then you see the real them. You see what they're like behind closed doors when they're more comfortable with you. But the borderlines, so they have the fear of abandonment. They can often be very impulsive. And so they can be wild with their mood swings. They can split on people, love you one second, go into hating you the next, because they lack object constancy. Like they're not able to have that whole object relations, as they call it, right? If they're mad at you, they can no longer see that version of you anymore that they actually liked and cared about. They're done from black to white.
So you don't have any, am I wrong? Do you have any formal training in psychology?
No, I went to mental health counseling school. But most of this I just learned on my own. I learned on my own because of my own experience. And then Richard, I've listened to a lot of him over the years too.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I've actually, I have a lot of friends who are psychologists or psychiatrists, and they've said to me, like, honestly, you know a lot about the stuff, probably more than some psychologists. And I found, I don't know if that's true, that's just what they said, but I found that people like yourself that have been through bad shit and have researched and studied, like really have a grasp of how all this works with no degree.
I think when you have that pain and you're trying to figure things out from the abuse you experienced, it really motivates you to learn about this stuff. You're like, what the hell happened? I want to figure out what happened to me. And I think when you've lived it, and I've lived it in many areas, and I'm grateful now, though. I'm grateful that I did live everything I lived because it made me who I am today. It made me the person that is able to help people in the way I do today. If I didn't go through those things, I certainly wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now. And perhaps you could say it's easy for me to say because I'm in one piece. I'm not in jail. I'm not dead. But that's how I see it. I see it, okay, it happened. I learned from those experiences now, and I'm kind of grateful they happened to an extent. And I think you just understand it when you lived it. If someone hasn't been through it themselves, there's just going to be a little bit of a disconnect because when you read about it in a textbook, it's just not the same. It's not the same when you read about it in a textbook. Something gets lost in translation between how it presents in reality versus how you read about it in a book or learn about it in school.
So you said like in one piece, which is a great image. And I and you, I'm sure, have audience members that feel like they're not in one piece. And so a lot of them ask, well, how do you get to be in one piece? So like, how did you get to the point that you can say to yourself, yeah, I'm in one piece? Like, how did you arrive there?
I'll tell you, it was a wild road because I'm not going to say it was easy in any way. It was not easy at all. And I had maybe other variables that some people didn't have, like the neurodivergent part, the autistic part was one. Figuring that out, and then like a lot of supplements really helped me today. That's a big piece of the puzzle. But I'd also gone to 12-step programs years ago. And that was where I started learning about self-awareness. I learned about, I was able to start admitting when I was wrong, learning how like self-centered I had been and trying to be honest with myself and others and learning some humility, learning some accountability. That was humongous. I'm writing on the Step Working Guide. It took a lot of work, and it took a lot of pain, and it took a lot of acceptance of what's going on here and trying to learn and stay open-minded and working on what I can work on, which is me. I can't change anybody else. I can only work on me. So, and again, that took years. Like I started this process when I was 23 or 24. And then it took me probably until my early 30s to feel like I was in a good place, like mentally, physically, emotionally. I'd always been in good shape physically, but that mental health component is a little bit different. That trauma component is a little bit different. Because you'll hear some people say, oh, just get in shape and your depression will go away. It's like, that really depends, right? That really depends on what's causing your depression. For some people, sure, that's going to help you. But when there's other stuff going on, trauma, CPTSD, maybe undiagnosed with something else going on, it's not going to be that simple. So it took a long time. But moving forward and not giving up, that's what I would say is key. If you give up or you stop trying to work on yourself, you're not going to change. If nothing changes, nothing changes.
Yeah, and you also mentioned humility, and it's funny. That's a conversation Richard and I have had about it. Humility is so important to like admit, I screwed up. I misidentified what this thing was. I was too eager. I was too desperate, whatever the thing is. Because without that, I feel like you can't really there's no healing, right?
Absolutely. I call it there's 5 ingredients to change. Like the first one is you have to have the humility to even admit there's a problem. That's one. 2, you got to be honest with yourself and others, because if you can't admit exactly what that problem is, well, now you're not going to be working on the right thing. And then the few more are the willingness to change, because no one can give somebody else the willingness to change. We have to want it ourselves. Then we have to put in that footwork to change. If we don't do the footwork and take actions, nothing's going to change. And then perhaps most important is the resilience to keep going when it gets tough and not blame others, not do that, but instead say, okay, it's hard, but I'm going to keep on standing up. I'm going to keep on trying and to do better. That resilience part is huge.
Yeah, it really is, right? And it's funny because I think that's, I have certain thoughts on the 12-step program, for instance, which I've never done. Like to me, the negative part of it, to hear me out here, the negative part of it is that you're like sick forever. You've always got this problem, which I don't think is healthy. But the positive part I keep thinking about is this whole idea of giving it over to a higher power, giving it over to God, kind of that concept. Because I feel like you sidestep your ego to some degree, because you say like, I don't know what I'm doing. I can't do this. I hope there's something bigger inside me that can handle this. Like, I think that's positive, right?
I would agree with that. And I think, especially for someone like you, I know you've had experience with cults, NAAA, there's some cult elements in there. There absolutely is. Now, I don't go there anymore, though. I don't go for the reasons you just said. I don't like saying I'm always an addict. I'm sick, sick, sick. I don't like that kind of self-talk. And I know why they do it. And I know why they say things like one's too many, 1,000's never enough. But ultimately, I don't like that. I don't like that. That's not how I choose to see myself today. So I don't. But that being said, I do think there's positive elements in there too. I think it solves a lot of issues that people are having where if you don't have a community, oh no, guess what? Now you have a community. You can get a sponsor and work with somebody. It's kind of like, it's not therapy, but it's just someone to talk to. It kind of comes out like CBT. You get some self-awareness and you have a common goal. So I think those things are helpful. And I think for someone that if you're going to die because of the addiction that you have, well, that version of a semi-cult-like thing is still a step in the right direction in comparison to being dead.
100% true. I absolutely agree. So let's just talk about radical self-respect. I love that term. So how did you come to that term? Why is it important for you?
Well, this is a big thing, right? This is what I learned from the 12-step rooms is I have to take a look at my side of the street here. And so many people confuse that for blaming or victim blaming or something. But that's not what it is. It's just empowering ourselves to change what we can change, our side of the street. So after that relationship with the Brazilian woman, I asked myself, what could I have done differently? what could I have done differently in this situation to maybe prevent it from happening? And the answer I came up with was practicing radical self-respect. To me, that is the guardrails that can protect us from those kinds of people. Because specifically what I wasn't okay with was myself. I wasn't happy and single. I was addicted to how this woman made me feel about me. And all of that contributed to me overlooking red flags and just putting up with disrespect. Like I should have never put up with it, but I did. Why did I? Because I was addicted to how she made me feel, and I didn't want to be alone. So that part was on me. It wasn't on me how she treated me. It wasn't on me the abuse and other nonsense that occurred, but that part was me. Yeah, if I had practiced radical self-respect, at the first sign of that massive disrespect, I'm gone, baby, gone. But instead, I was clinging. And running after her, which was horrible.
That makes perfect sense. It's the fine line, and I talked to a bunch of people about this because I agree 100%. Like, I think if I'd had more self-respect, I would not have looked outside for all the answers. I would not look outside at the grand poobahs thinking they knew more than I did. And maybe they did know more than I did, but there was a certain well, I'm just a piece of shit. I don't know anything, and I'm kind of dumb, and they're kind of smart. And maybe if I hang around them, I'll be smarter. That kind of thing where the locus of control was so far outside of me. And when I say that to people, sometimes they say, yeah, but you were a victim of something. I say, yeah, I was. I was never taught what psychopaths were, how they behaved. I assumed that if somebody said something, they meant it. I didn't understand that you could be that duplicitous. But I was desperate in many ways emotionally, which kind of, was the perfect storm, right?
Right. I think people really struggle with more than one thing being true at the same time, where on one hand, it can absolutely be a trauma bond, right? And that's absolutely a thing. But it can also be true that there are things that we can work on too. It's not just one or the other. People want it to be just this, just that. It's like, that's not really how life works. There's going to be more nuance.
Do you get backlash for this kind of idea?
Oh, for sure. Sometimes. Absolutely. Because they're the people that think, and granted, depending on where someone is in the process, I'm not going to bombard somebody with this, oh, look at your side of the street instantly. It's like, no. In the beginning, you need support. You need encouragement. You need validation. And then people learn about the toxic behaviors of the narcissists, psychopaths, cults, etc. And that's part of the process. That's what I did. And so, but eventually time goes on and you say, okay, well, I've learned a lot about this. What's the next step? The next step is looking at my side of the street. So I emphasize that part too, but I also do think it is important to get to that next step. It's important to say, okay, what are we learning about narcissism for years for? Are we just addicted to the content, watching the things they did? But what are we doing in our own lives? And I like an expression, we can't get ahead if we're trying to get even. And sometimes people get caught up in that, right? They really want to get even with the narcissistic person. And to me, when somebody really wants that, outside of seeking justice, perhaps, that's a little different. But outside of that, it's like, what is that going to do for you? What is that really going to do for you to get even with them? The best revenge is really no revenge, or as Frank Sinatra would say, the best revenge is massive success. We live for us, right? And if we really care too much about what they think and feel, to me, that is being subscribed to their distorted version of reality. How does somebody act when they no longer care? When they're unsubscribed, how do you act? Well, now you're not going to be stalking their page anymore. You're not going to think about, oh, what are they going to think or feel if I do this? What are they going to think or feel if I do that? It's like, no, do what is best for you, regardless of what they think or feel about it. Unless safety is a thing. That's another caveat too.
Right. It sounds like you're channeling some people that I've spent time with. Yeah. There is an obsession for a while, certainly at the beginning, but you're right. If it keeps on going, you're still living in their universe.
That's understandable, right? Because it can be, depending on how long that trauma bond was or how much time it took. Yeah, that's understandable. It's understandable to be caught up with it. And I don't want to invalidate that side of it because it's absolutely a thing, right? It is. But in people's journey, eventually there comes a point where it's like, okay, what are we doing in our own lives now? How are we to move forward? And to me, that was where I really found like freedom. Any growth that I've had, it's because I looked at me. It's because I tried to do something different in my own life. Like, to me, that should be like one of the goals for us. And I don't think that's an invalidating thing to say, but some people try to frame it like it is an invalidating thing to say.
Yeah, I was thinking like getting a person to stop looking at his page or stop looking at her page, like that doesn't really work. I think a good sign, tell me what you think, is when they start to lose interest in looking at their abuser or keeping up with their abuser, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good cue that you're unsubscribed now. If you no longer, like you don't care anymore and you reduce in significance, like how much you think about them and how much power or control they have over your life. And sometimes that is kind of self-inflicted in a way where people kind of hold on to it and they like see it through their lens. And again, that happens. That can be part of the trauma bond for sure. But when we no longer care, that's true freedom to me. When we no longer care, we remember the lesson, forget the person. That's another thing I'm a big fan of.
Hey, quick interlude. If you're liking these conversations and want to help me keep expressing what is on my mind, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and maybe even follow the podcast wherever you listen. And if you want to go a step further in supporting the show and getting access to some behind-the-scenes rants, you can join me over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Mark Vicente. It really does make a difference. All right, back to the episode. I want to go back to something because as you're talking, the way you described like the earlier part of your life, it sounded really, really dark. Like you went to some bad places. And I'm pretty impressed that you are who you are now, given what you've told me about where you've come from. And I'm still feeling like, yeah, but what was the thing? Because you said there was a shift. And I'm still not clear, like, what was the thing that made you choose you?
Well,
instead of annihilation.
That was a long time coming. I mean, what happened to me was like in high school, I would get picked on a lot. And so I really became more of like pretty much like a social loner at that point. And that's when I started finding the opiates, like around my freshman year of college. And that did bring me to a dark place because looking back at it now, I just didn't really have hope. Like all I really wanted was to use that substance. And then when I had that substance, I really just wanted to like date or womanize. Like that was the extent of my life, was thinking that, which was looking back on it now is ridiculous. Like, but that's what it was. I was just in a really dark place. And eventually, after getting arrested and having all sorts of negative consequences, I just got tired of those negative consequences. I had enough. I was crashing cars, and I'm lucky to be alive. Like I still remember this. There's people that I would be driving in the car with. There'd be like 5 of us. Every one of those people in that car is dead, except for me right now. So I try to, and so they'd be my age and younger. But I try to use that as, okay, I got a chance here at life. I don't want to waste this. And I can't stress the mental health piece, though, because I see that as if you don't have that down, it's going to distort how you see everything. It's going to influence how you see everything. I consider it like seeing life through a distorted lens. You have to fix that lens because if you're super depressed, if you're anxious, that's going to influence everything. So, and I don't care what works for people. I don't care what works. If going to therapy works, great. If going to a 12-step program works, great. If medication works, great. If supplements work, great. Sleep, diet, exercise, great. I don't care, but it's essential to get that down because that's the biggest thing I see with people that are depressed. Like it closes off your opportunities. Like life shrinks so that you don't see it anymore. You don't see like through it because you're being blocked by your depression from seeing it. So what I say to people in that spot is there can be solutions that you don't even know exist right now. And that's how it was for me. There was solutions I didn't even know existed in the form of supplements, in the form of, and this might get me some pushback too, but I'm big into mindset stuff. Some people don't like that, but I do think it's important. I think attitude is important. And those things were huge for me. And then having like hope that, okay, what's a life I could build for myself and learning to give back what I've been given. That's something I learned in the 12-step programs too. And then just getting all my mission and purpose. Like that was a big thing for me too. Like, okay, I have experience with this, the codependency. I've experience with dating issues. I've experience with narcissism. I've experience with addiction. I can help people in all of these areas now. And, I started posting online. And it wasn't really until I started talking about the narcissism experience that I had that people started noticing. Like I was talking about radical self-respect first, but no one really cared. No one really cared because I needed the pain point first. Like, oh, why should we care about radical self-respect? It's like, oh, well, this is one reason to care because this is the pain point, right? This is what I went through. And that's like, it started giving me hope for a future because when you're depressed, you become hopeless and that life just really shrinks. And again, and mental health is just like with a narcissistic relationship. For someone who doesn't understand, it's just going to be really difficult. Like you just don't. It's so hard because there's differences between situational depression and situational anxiety versus the innate. Like maybe it's from your genetics. Maybe it's from an undiagnosed issue of something else, a hormonal imbalance. There's many things it could be. And if someone doesn't have experience with it, it's just going to be difficult for them to really relate to it and understand.
Just to go back to the supplements thing, it's such a good point. I remember, I think it was 2019 because I was a mess. And during the like trial prep before the big trial we went through, I remember my wife turned me on to this particular supplement, which I started taking. We both started taking it. And my God, the difference. I had days where I felt like almost normal. And I'm like, oh, that's what almost normal feels like. And I realized, oh, there's so much stuff going on biochemically because of all the fight and flight and the adrenals and the whatever and the fear that I didn't even realize what it had done to my sort of chemistry,
Oh, I mean, that's a huge thing, right? I think they're like pieces of the puzzle. So, I mean, I take a lot of supplements because I think for the extent of your issues, you need a solution just as drastic. And this is what like I did for me, but there's other versions of it too. But there's certain things like SAM-E, for example. That was a big one that really started to help me. It just put pieces of the puzzle together in my brain. Like it connected things that before, like it just was super difficult. But then I started taking that and all of a sudden possibilities seemed to be like more abundant. And I was like, oh, okay, this is putting something together in me that was just a little bit off. And again, some people say, oh, the neurotransmitter myth or the chemical imbalance myth. And I would say, I don't know about that. I think there can be some truth in it. Now, the thing is, it's not the only thing. Like that's just one component. Your neurotransmitters and your hormones are one component. There's still other components that also matter, like the emotional health, spiritual health, your community, your goals, your relationships. They all contribute too. Or if you have a spiritual component, that also matters.
Just to go to something you said, and thank you for that. I think that's super important. Something you said about the pain point, because I notice, and maybe you see the same thing, if I post something about how fucked up something is, so many people pay attention, repost, whatever. When I post about the good news, they're like, yeah, they're not that interested. It's really interesting. I don't know. Do you find that?
I absolutely do see that. I think there's people that they drift towards the negative or they drift towards the negative. I mean, Mr. Beast said this too. He said that if you post a negative thing, it's way more likely to get a lot of attention. If you post like oh, let's take some accountability here. Look at our side of the street. They're like, who needs that? Oh, talk about the big bad narcissist. Oh yeah, let's talk about this more. And so it's kind of just what social media rewards in a way. Like social media rewards certain types of posts, certain types of behaviors. And then what social media rewards, you see more of. And so, I mean, I've seen it. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. But here's the thing. So I'm feeling for myself, like if you're offering me the concept of radical self-respect versus you're offering me 10 ways they fucked your life up. The 10 ways they fucked your life up sounds more accessible because the radical self-respect sounds hard, right? That sounds like that's going to be really hard. Like, what does that mean? That means I'm going to have to love myself. I'm going to have to dig into a bunch of dark corners I don't want to dig into. So I don't know. Do you find that when you work with people, when you talk about radical self-respect?
Yeah, there is a little bit of pushback against it because a lot of people at first, they just want clarity on their situations, right? They want clarity on what happened to them. And I do offer them that. I do offer them that. The real growth, though, after that is when we look at ourselves. But some people are really opposed to that. They think, because here's the other thing. In the narcissism topic, in the narcissism space, cult space, etc., there's an entertainment factor there. Like people, I think some people watch it for entertainment as well. And it can be interesting. It's educational. And then just like the self-help, strict self-help, unless you're watching like an Alex Hormozy, which, hey, I consider him capitalist porn is what I call him. And I think we all need a little bit of capitalist porn. I think there's some things to learn there. And he kind of makes it a little bit entertaining, but I also watch some of that as well. And I think the thing is, in the narcissism space, there's just not as many people that are really going to be into that. Like they like learning about the toxic behaviors because it's validating. And don't get me wrong, when you've been gaslit, when you've been blamed for everything, told everything's your fault, and you're the worst, constantly criticized, I totally get how validating it is to find a content creator like you or me or anyone else in the space talking about their experiences in a way they can completely relate to. Like, oh my God, that guy's sharing my story. Oh my God, that's exactly what happened to me. And it's kind of like the person dying of thirst in a desert. It's like, oh my goodness, thank goodness this person is like teaching me about this stuff. It's the most validating I've heard for ages. So I totally get that aspect of it. And I think, and that I went through that. Like I was addicted to it for a while and I loved it. I just think eventually there comes a point where you move through. And there's just not as much emphasis on that.
So one of the things you do you call yourself a coach?
Yeah, I mean, a consultation or sometimes a wizard.
Yeah. Yeah, a wizard. I like that. So how do you help people? This is a very general question, of course, but like, how do you help people set the course towards, radical self-respect?
Well, the first step is like figuring out what their situation's problems even are. So if you're in a toxic relationship, figuring that out, because it's really difficult to improve in an extremely toxic environment. So you got to break free from some of these environments a lot of times, or end relationships. And then from there, it just takes a little bit of time. And I try to help them to aim for something, right? Because leaving a relationship, just like stopping a drug, it's like, okay, that's great. But now what are you going to aim for? That's where like we're really trying to self-actualize here and become what I would say the best version of ourselves and work towards something. And I think it takes a lot of work to get people there because there's all sorts of things that can be getting in the way of that. It could be mental health stuff, could be an addiction, could be an addiction to a person, it could be mindset stuff, but there's a lot of things to sift through before you get them onto that self-actualizing path. And again, it's just another reason why it's just not as popular, right? Because there's so many other things to sift through first.
Yeah, exactly. I have a thought about radical for a second, but first, in working with people, where do you find that most people get the most stuck? Where do they get the most difficulty to get out of a certain perspective?
In the beginning, I think people just really struggle to accept that a narcissistic or abusive person is just that way. Like we teach them all about the narcissistic behaviors, the abusive behaviors, and then having people truly accept like what we say in the space is this is how you have to treat that person. Don't jade. Don't justify, argue, defend, or explain. Don't get sucked into their emotional entanglements. You can't expect them to validate your perception of reality. You can't accept them to agree with your perspective. They're going to gaslight. They are going to twist and distort things. They are going to flip the script. They're going to use Darvo, deny, accuse, reverse victim, and offender. They're going to be a cry bully. A cry bully, someone that plays the victim in the situation they created. Like, it's just accepting those things is number one. And that's what people struggle with. They want to treat them like a normal person, but they're just not a normal person, which might sound dehumanizing sometimes, but in my experience, it's absolutely true. Some of these people, they're just not going to be like a normal person because a normal person is going to collaborate with you. A normal person, it's not going to feel like a battle with them. everything's not going to be so difficult with a normal person. But with a toxic person, a narcissistic person, everything's a battle. And it's because of what their goals are. Their goals are they want to win, they want to be right, they want to get their way, they want power and control. And when you understand that, then their behaviors make more sense. And that's why I always say, like, everything a narcissist will do will make sense if you understand everything they're doing is about power, control, managing their image, narcissistic supply, and avoiding accountability. If you put someone's behavior through that lens and it makes sense, now you at least know what you're dealing with. And then you have to accept what you're dealing with. And really, there's not healthy relationships you're going to have with people like that. And you have to accept that too. You can't hope for the best, or they might think, well, we had some good days. There's even some good weeks. But that's part of it too, because it always circles back around to the not so good times too. So it takes that acceptance piece is what I see people get the most caught up on.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I 100% agree. In fact, when I started understanding like who my, cult leader was, I remember reading a lot of H.G. Tudor stuff online. And as I was reading, I was like, oh, this is what's going on. Oh, this is what's going on. And it gave me enormous freedom because I'm like, oh, so he wasn't any of those things. That was all just an act. That was all just presentation. This is what was actually going on. Yeah, it was pretty enlightening. Do you have a lot of male clientele, or is it sort of even?
It's pretty much 50-50. I think there's probably more women at first, but I find a lot of men will be more likely to do repeat sessions, because I also help men with dating stuff too. So that's another element of it, but it's pretty close to even, I would say.
Are there different struggles that guys have in this space who've been abused in this way?
Yes, we might get into some controversial ground here, but I think in the space, there's a little bit of man-hate in some of the space, that it drifts into that direction where it's like, oh, instead of saying narcissistic, it's just all men. All men are like this. And that can be pretty invalidating for a lot of men in this space, because they're like, well, I wasn't like this. And I think there's not as much talk about narcissistic women. And granted, there's a lot of narcissistic mothers out there, narcissistic grandmothers, narcissistic family members that are women. And some women who have experienced it, they know. But others who have not, they don't know. And they just kind of dismiss it. They think, oh, well, because there's some people that think, and I'll call it out here, this might get you in trouble, but like someone like Lundy Bancroft says that men don't get abused by women. Because any man who says he is really the abuser themselves. Which I get what he's saying to an extent, because yes, a narcissist's accusations are confessions, but that totally dismisses the fact there are some men who have been abused by women. There are narcissistic women in relationships that are in control of the relationship. They have the power. They're wearing the pants. And the other guy is just being like run around by his nose. Like, that happens. But people, you got to be really careful, because a lot of people don't like hearing that. They think, or they'll say, what about men? What about men? And there's so much of the gender war going on right now out there that I don't think is helpful. I don't like it.
It's horrible. I ran into a female psychologist in Atlanta like a few years ago, who recognized me, and we started talking. And I sort of broached the subject with her, like, what about all this man hate? She goes, oh my God, it's terrible. I said, well, what do you think? She says, well, first of all, there's a lot of women that are like, what are these other women doing? They're just driving men underground and away. It's very sad to me. It actually feels very painful to me, because I know a lot of good men. Like, I know a lot of really, really good men. Men that would die for ideas and die for love. And I'm like, are we just going to put everybody in the same basket? It's the same as, in some ways, inverse, of the kind of men who think all women are terrible. I'm like, come on. Yeah. I'm sorry your mom hurt you, but that's bullshit, And so then the reverse, of course, somehow seems acceptable. I don't understand how we got here. I really don't.
Well,
maybe you can tell me. Do you know how we got here?
It's the reward system. So a lot of the people that do man-hating stuff, it gets rewarded. And it annoys me the most when I see men doing it. and I see men pandering to the
Oh
women.
my God.
I'm not a fan of them. So I see it, and and what I think about when I see them, and I'll name some of them, people like Chris Perry is a good example, or Derek Jackson's a good example, or I forget the other guy's name, but they pander to women is what they're doing. And they just say, they act as if women are perfect just the way they are, and it's always the man that was the problem. And unfortunately, it works for them. They blow up doing that, and it becomes a very successful business. But what I would say to the people that really follow them would be, hey, if you can't see that this person's manipulating you by just telling you they're basically love bombing the people that follow them. You're just great. You're amazing the way they are. You don't need to change anything. It was just the guy that's the problem. And granted, again, validation's important, and especially right after an abusive relationship. But there comes a point when validation alone is not what you need. And so any person that doesn't see through that, I'm like, you are very susceptible to being sucked into another toxic relationship, if you ask me. If you can't see what's going on with that, what have you learned? Not much.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know who God Saad is?
Yep.
So he talked about the sneaky fucker fish.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yep.
I thought it was so interesting. I'm going to do my best to explain. Tell me if I have it right. But basically, it's a male fish that pretends to be a female so it can mate with all the females. And the females usually take the male fish in thinking, oh, well, this is a very sensitive fish kind of thing, or whatever they think. And it's a sneaky fucker fish. Really, that's the term they use. And what you're describing is guys that are wearing a cloak of feminization, which my cult leader did the same shit, and that turned out very, very badly. So warning to all, watch out for the sneaky fucker fish. I swear a lot on my podcast. I wanted to shift for a second and talk about, a couple of weeks or months ago, I was looking at your stuff because I've been following you for quite a while, and you started talking about Sadiya Khan. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what is going on here? And you really took issue with some stuff she said. Would you mind talking about that?
There's a lot of things I took issue with her. I started calling her out a couple years ago because she has admitted to being a narcissist in some of her comments, for one, because she said she would much rather be a narcissist than a pathetic victim. And it's like, okay, you're going to set yourself up here as a psychologist, which she is not. She's lied about her credentials.
So what is she actually?
She's just a relationship coach. That's what she is.
Okay.
She has a teaching degree, and she's a relationship coach. And then people allowed her to call herself a psychologist, which is misleading for sure. And then I don't like when people lie about their credentials. And then I don't like when she's going to be condescending as she is in her message. And I don't like how she treats the people that disagree with her. That's what a narcissistic person would do, right? They get disagreed with, they hate it. And she'll criticize people. Oh, you're an ugly person, or you're ridiculous, or you're a pathetic victim. It's like, who do you think you are? And what annoys me more is all of the flying monkeys that support her still, the people that defend her. For every toxic person, there's going to be usually a group of people that defend them too, which is also crazy making, right? It adds to the gaslighting effect. So with her, I wouldn't have had a problem with her if she just called herself a relationship coach and then she didn't lash out at the people that disagreed with her. But if you're going to lie and then you're going to treat people terribly, like you're now abusing people. You're abusing people. You're doing the exact opposite of what someone in your shoes is supposed to be doing. And I also criticize the creators that had her on because they didn't do their due diligence on her. Why didn't they do their due diligence? Because they just wanted views. They wanted views and viewership, and so they overlooked it. They didn't do their due diligence. But people like Goob on Instagram, people like Abba and Preach on YouTube, they did their due diligence. And so I'm very proud of them for doing that.
What was the thing she said recently, though, that you really took issue with? There was something she said was about victims or something?
Well, she was calling people pathetic victims, for one, and just calling people ugly and fat, or liking animal prawn, as she calls it. And what else did she do? Just like the lies. I hate when people lie about their credentials. And I'm someone, it's not that she doesn't have credentials that's the problem. It's that she's lying about it and misleading people about it. That to me is extremely problematic because I'm just a coach, for lack of a better word. So I don't mind people sharing what their knowledge is. I don't mind that at all. But to mislead people about it and call yourself like a psychologist like that, like to me, that's extremely unethical and dangerous.
So that's interesting. So she thinks that being a victim is pathetic, huh? Is that her thought?
Yeah, well, because she's narcissistic. She's admitted as such. And then she went on Nick Cannon's show, and I broke that down. And Nick Cannon, he is a diagnosed narcissist. So I labeled that video to Narcissists Talk About Narcissism. And it's just, yeah, to watch that in real time, it's hard to listen to, honestly, because there's all sorts of, what Sadia will say, her accusations are absolutely confessions. So she talks about what she thinks narcissists will do. She's just confessing what she's going to do. And so I can't wait for her to be irrelevant in the space. And perhaps I contribute to it by talking about her too, to keeping her relevant, but I want her to go away.
Yeah. I don't know a lot about her, but I do remember thinking, wow, this woman is really glamorous. And I worry about this thing in society where people look at the glamour and somehow equate that with some kind of morality. Because they look good, they must be valid or good people or whatever, as opposed to a schlump who maybe they think doesn't know anything. I mean, I think it's a real problem, this glamour thing, because I'm not just thinking about her. I'm thinking about a lot of people that are on television that like everybody adores them and worships them, and there's trash coming out of their mouth,
You made me think of a post I made recently. I had said a lot of people confuse someone who's charismatic for being authentic, which is absolutely not true. And they confuse someone who is awkward with being untrustworthy. And it's like not always true. Sometimes the awkward person is trustworthy, but their anxiety or awkwardness just makes it seem like they're not. And just the opposite with someone who's really charismatic and sometimes good looking, that can have the same effect too. It's like, just because you're charismatic doesn't mean you're authentic or genuine or correct. But a lot of people make that mistake.
It's crazy, isn't it? It is crazy. And that's, of course, that's a lot of politicians and a lot of, movie stars. I think one of the things that happened to me when I first went to Hollywood, because I really had stars in my eyes, and then I started working on a bunch of movies in Hollywood with a lot of the people I admired and saw what they were like. And I'm like, oh, shit, this is not what I thought. Because, there's a fair number of basket cases and a fair number of people that are quite mean,
Oh, I'm sure. The Hollywood celebrities, I think they're so far removed from reality now, a lot of them, that they think they're up here. And according to their wealth, yeah, maybe they are. But I think they just get disconnected. They get disconnected from the real world, I think, at that level.
Yeah. So listening to you talk about Sadia and other people, like you have a real, like, it seems, a real fire in your belly about people being misled. So what is that? Is this a thing of like you want justice for people, you want to protect people? Like what is that fire that you have?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's just that I don't like frauds. I don't like people who are fake and who are frauds, because I do my best to be as authentic as I can and genuine as I can. And so you see the real me. When you see me on a stream, I'm giving you my real thoughts. I'm not trying to pander or pretend. It's like, no, this is just me. You can take it or leave it. But when I see people misleading others and then abusing them on top of it and just overall being fraudulent and fake, I can't stand that. And I'm a big advocate of, like, bad things happen when people don't speak up. And that's where some of the toxic positivity folks will come in and say, oh, you're only trying to pull people down that are above you. It's like, well, dude, like, just because someone's quote unquote above you doesn't mean they are free from being called out. Like, you still got to call people out regardless of where they are in relation to you. The toxic positivity folks just use that as a way to shut criticism down. It's like, I know exactly what they're doing. Like, oh no, you have a poverty mentality if you call out this person. It's like, actually, no, you just want to make sure that bad things don't get enabled to happen. It's not the same.
100%. I was just thinking about radical self-respect again. So, I have found the times in my life that I have felt the most self-love, I have felt such a sense of completion and wholeness that I haven't felt the addictive pull towards people, towards substances, towards whatever, right? I've felt very, very centered. And I love the feeling. And when I'm there, I go like, oh, this is the feeling everybody wants in their life. And the proxy is other people and relationships and addictions and whatever. What's the difference? Is there a difference for you between that kind of self-love I'm talking about and radical self-respect?
That's a very good question. I think there's a balancing act that occurs where on one hand, we have to accept ourselves, but accept ourselves where we are and not like be overly hard on ourselves. And I have a question I ask people, like, what's the difference between the uncomfortable feeling that of growth versus the uncomfortable feeling of something that's not good for you? That's a very important distinction to make because not all uncomfortable feelings are bad. Some of them are just you growing and going into the next phase of life. But other uncomfortable feelings, rightfully so, it's because this person's like treating you poorly and they're not good for you. So there's a big difference there between those two things. And I think that's the balancing act though too. So accepting like, okay, I'm good how I am. I'm not going to hate myself, but also recognizing there's always room for improvement too. So I think having those two working in tandem is key.
That's interesting. So I think you're also suggesting then you can have self-respect, but not necessarily self-love. Like self-respect is just like the baseline we'd like to get to.
Yeah, so you can respect yourself, but you also might hate yourself too. Like I think that is a possibility. I think people, and so I think some of the most successful people, they have, and it might be a trauma response that they're doing this with, but they have this never-ending drive to work and go, 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 go. And maybe it's because at the root level there, they wouldn't know how to be still and they're not okay with themselves. I was watching Dr. K be interviewed by Stephen on the Diary of a CEO, and they talked about that very subject. And I know, because I have some of this in me too, that Stephen has, where it's easier for him to work than it is to stay still. And then, so when that's the case for somebody, their issues are going to be different. It's easier for him to work hard. It's almost like when you don't feel the pain of something, that's not courage, that's madness. Like if you can go, 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 and you don't even feel the discomfort, that's because it's more of a madness. But if you feel the discomfort and do it anyway, that's more of a courage. So I totally get that aspect of it. And I think, again, it comes down to the acceptance of it too. It's like, okay, what's my real motivations here? Like, why do I really want to go, 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 go? Is it because I want to be seen as a certain way? Is it for my image? Do I feel worthless if I don't? Did my parents get on my case for being lazy? And that's how it was for me a little bit too. You can still sometimes hear your parents' voice in your ear. Like if you ever take a break, you're being lazy, you're being lethargic. Or if you ever gain a few pounds, they're the first one to point it out to you. Oh, you're gaining some pounds, wait. So they say, like how your parents spoke to you becomes your internal voice as an adult. And it's like, yeah, I totally get it. So we have to be aware of that though. Awareness is huge.
Yeah. I was just thinking, like I was a straight A student in high school for quite some time until I realized like it didn't make me any worthier. And I was like, well, screw it. Then I'm just going to like abandon like even studying hard. Just a final thought, a final question for you. Just thinking about the audience, like obviously they can contact you, but like what's a small manageable step someone listening or watching can take today to begin practicing radical self-respect?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. I think just trusting yourself to do one thing a day. So I think a good one to start with is making your bed. You trust yourself to do one thing no matter what. And when you can build that trust with yourself, that is essential because especially in toxic relationships, that's what you lose. You don't know how to trust your gut anymore. You don't trust your perception of reality. You favor the other person's perception of reality, right? And I think learning to trust yourself, trust your gut, and then build on that, to me, that is humongous.
I love that. I love that. Jared, thank you very much for an awesome conversation. I really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I enjoyed speaking with you as well.
And to my audience, as always, please, please stay curious.